All right, so the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk are in a standoff. How long would this standoff last? Well, we can look at previous seasons where the 49ers have always gotten these contracts done with their A-list players. 2020, George Kittle, done before training camp. 2021, Fred Warner, done before training camp. 22, Deebo Samuel, done a few days into training camp. 23, Nick Bosa, took all the way through training camp and the preseason, done a couple days before the regular season. So these things have been taking longer and longer over time. Will Brandon Aiyuk's take even longer? It's totally possible because it seems that both sides are far apart. I talked about it earlier. The 49ers have a very specific budget. Brandon Aiyuk wants more money than that budget, but the 49ers have leverage. So where do they get leverage? Why didn't they have as much of it last year with Nick Bosa? How's this situation different? So I want to talk about the 49ers offense and Brock Purdy and how they've actually insulated themselves to operate without Brandon Aiyuk. So that way they can withstand some discomfort here in this situation. They can withstand time without Brandon Aiyuk and hold true to their current offer. Because the 49ers have a very, very specific financial plan. It's like a game of Tetris that they're trying to operate with very limited space as the pieces come falling down. They've got Brock Purdy on the books for $1 million this year. It's going to be a lot more than $1 million next year and a whole lot more down the road. They've got other players that they're going to have to re-up, other players that they have to bring in here over the course of the next couple of years. We don't even know which positions are going to be the acute needs yet, but as seasons go, they usually tell us those answers, and a team has to be ready to pivot, and they have to have enough money under the salary cap to be able to pivot. So they have to be as preemptively judicious with their Brandon Aiyuk offer as possible. And one thing that they did to help arm them with the optionality that's going to benefit them here moving forward into the into the next few months is draft Ricky Pearsall. This is the key difference between the Brandon Aiyuk and the Nick Bosa situations. The 49ers didn't have other truly standout edge rushers last year when Nick Bosa was negotiating his contract with them. The 49ers, they didn't even have Randy Gregory or Chase Young at the time, neither of whom are 49ers anymore. Those were mid-season trades for San Francisco. They had just lost Samson Ebukam. Yes, they had picked up Clelin Ferrell, but nobody expected him to be a pass rushing force. Clelin Ferrell for San Francisco was going to be a run stopper. He was going to be an edge setter for them on the side opposite Nick Bosa. The defense was not going to be able to tick at all without Nick Bosa, which meant that the deadline pressure of week one saw the 49ers really under fire. This situation is very different because the deadline pressure of week one and beyond would not put the 49ers under a similar kind of fire as when Nick Bosa was not at the facility and potentially not planning to suit up. The 49ers drafted Ricky Pearsall, another wide receiver, so he's at Aiyuk's position in the first round. They still have Deebo Samuel under contract for all the speculation that he might be traded. He might not be with the 49ers for long. He's a really damn good receiver. He remains under contract. They've made the move to keep Juwan Jennings, one of the best route runners that they've had. I mean, he's a separator. Kyle Shanahan will tell you, and he said this years ago, that Juwan Jennings was up there with anybody on this 49ers team as far as separation goes. We also know that he can block his ass off at that receiver position. He's still a weapon on this team. George Kittle, you've got to consider him a receiving target. He had 1,000 yards last season. You can go all the way down the list to guys like Kyle Juszczyk, Isaac Guerrero. He was a receiver before he was a running back. Then he moved to that running back position. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey. He's just got paid as if he does both, as if he catches the football out of the backfield on top of his running ability, and that indeed is true. This was the number one offense in football last season, to the point where I've got to share a really cool stat with everybody. Warren Sharp came up with this on Twitter. And to me, it is staggering. And it does underscore the value of Brandon Aiyuk, at least partly, but it also underscores the unit-wide power of the 49ers offense. check this out. 75 plus yard touchdown drives last season. The 49ers had 39 touchdown drives that went 75 yards or longer. That's the most in the NFL, needless to say. They're very top of this stat. The second most was Miami with 35. Then you had to go all the way down to 30, Dallas and Detroit. The middle of the pack, it looks like the median in the NFL was about 22. And then week one, shout out to 2024 week one, the Jets had only 6 touchdown drives of 75 yards or longer. Now, first and foremost, this is a Brock Purdy stat. You don't do this unless your quarterback is orchestrating everything at a very, very high level. But it's not just a Brock Purdy stat. It's a Kyle Shanahan stat. It's a 49ers skill position weapon stat. It's a 49ers offensive line stat to some extent, right? Obviously, Purdy was able to beat a lot of pressure last season, but the 49ers were still effective enough when it came to delivering the necessary protection up front to make the pass game work and obviously make the run game work on top of that. So you have this stat that just showcases the awesome effectiveness of the 49ers offense. And then you realize that they still have all of these weapons on the roster, including Brandon Aiyuk. But the fact that Brandon Aiyuk, plus Ricky Pearsall, obviously, but the fact that Brandon Aiyuk is not with the team right now obviously threatens some of the structural integrity of that offense, since he was their most efficient receiver, since he was that X receiver, that target to beat man coverage. That being said, I think that the 49ers, when you look at something like this, are well insulated to overcome even without their best target, especially since they've added another receiver who can potentially run that X position. Will they be as powerful offensively? No, but there was already a wide gap between the 49ers and the rest of the league last season. And I think a stat like this really, really illustrates the gap between the 49ers and the rest of the league. And this is a combination of run offense and pass offense. It's total offense, the ability to string together a long drive with efficiency. That's going to require everybody. Now, Brandon Aiyuk obviously is at the center of the effort because of his ability to beat man coverage, his ability to catch the football, draw defenders. Obviously, he can run block, but another central engine, perhaps a more important one, certainly a more important one, we'll put it that way, is Brock Purdy. And he gives the 49ers true run pass luxury. Brock Purdy is the weapon at the center of the offense that has stabilized things for the 49ers to the extent where they were the number one pass offense in football last year and the number 3 run offense in football last year. There is a run pass balance at the top that makes the 49ers much less dependent on a single skill position weapon, regardless of whether or not he's an all-pro, than probably any other offense in the league. And that's what Kyle Shanahan was trying to design when he decided to make this a run-forward unit. I no longer want to say that this is a run-first unit because it's just not how things work with the 49ers. The 49ers are, and I think in the playoffs, they called 109 pass plays and 77 run plays. So Brock Purdy has made this a pass-first unit. I think the regular season might dictate different priorities, so they might still run a little bit more than they pass. That just, I think, really depends on a game-by-game situation. But the point is they can do both. And I think that when we look at the 49ers depth chart, it is really, really clear that they have a lot of adaptable guys that in totality help give them leverage in this Brandon Aiyuk situation. So the way that it's different from the Bosa situation is that last year you didn't really have anybody that could spell Bosa, anybody that can give you a credible threat outside of him. This year with Brandon Aiyuk at the receiver position, it's very, very different. Whether you're looking at Samuel, Jennings, Pearsall, hell, even Jacob Cowing, we'll see what he can do. Chris Conley made some big catches for the 49ers down the stretch. Those are just the guys I project to make the 53 on the receiver unit. But beyond that, you could look at some of the running backs, obviously McCaffrey, and the tight end, George Kittle, and you could see that this is a absolutely loaded 49ers outfit that gives them a big, big leg up in a potential standoff. And I think we're already seeing a standoff with Brandon Aiyuk, but we don't know if that standoff is going to last yet into the regular season. But when we examine the receiving room, Aiyuk has been the X. He's been the guy that's been able to do so much for you as far as beating man coverage, beating zone coverage. You guys know that I show this a lot. We all have similar charts for Brandon Aiyuk, X-axis, Y-axis against man, against zone, and he's in the top right of all those charts. I think on a per snap efficiency basis, I'll say it first, I think Brandon Aiyuk is actually underrated. I think that's why he's a little bit upset. I think that Brandon Aiyuk knows that he delivers this kind of production, that on a per snap level, he's really, really damn impressive, that he's got a resume that nobody else can say that they have. And I think that makes him want to be paid at or very near the very top. The problem is that the very top of the market has gotten completely out of hand with Justin Jefferson at that price that's 70% higher than number 2. And the 49ers aren't in position to make a payment that's way out of hand. They're not a team like the Minnesota Vikings that doesn't have a lot of star players on the roster that can just go out and bid against themselves and award a massive contract. The 49ers are operating within the ecosystem of Bosa under contract, Kittle, Deebo Samuel, you name it. Fred Warner, we mentioned him in 2021, and then Brock Purdy coming up in 2024. They're operating within that framework. They've already made some cuts to try to cater to that framework. Obviously, Eric Armstead wouldn't take the pay cut, so he's gone. That saved them about $10 million. Kyle Juszczyk has renegotiated his contract. So the 49ers have tried to set things up to be as sustainable as possible, but the whole thing comes crashing down if you give just one really big contract that's inefficient. So they have to make sure that the Aiyuk money remains efficient so that it fits into the general cost structure of what they're doing. That's why I made this right here, the contract prediction. Now, this is already about 2.5 months old, but it has the way that I think the 49ers are going to try to structure this deal to make Aiyuk happy and to fit within their salary cap situation. They could keep the cap hits low early on and stash some of that money for later, but they have to still be dealing with numbers that are manageable enough in the present so that they also stay manageable when they roll over here into the past, into the future. So if you're giving Brandon Aiyuk a $30 million signing bonus and a $20 million option bonus, that's great because they're only hitting the cap at $6 million and $4 million per year over a 5-year proration, respectively. But you have to make sure that those numbers are going to work with your books, or at least give you a chance for them to work with your books by the year 2027 and 2028. That's why it's tricky to thread this needle. And then when you have Justin Jefferson signing for what he signed for, Brandon Aiyuk is going to want those numbers to be bigger than before, probably. And you look and see, okay, well, we can accommodate this, but we can't accommodate this. And ultimately, the 49ers are at their price right now. And that price is unlikely to budge up until a more firm deadline meets. And I think the deadline threatens Brandon Aiyuk more than it threatens the 49ers. But anyway, just back to the offensive construction of this football team, because I know a lot of people have been talking about the business aspect of this all day. I know I've been talking about the business aspect. I think that the football aspect is something that probably even more fascinating, because you start to ask the real existential question for football players. Does Kyle Shanahan need Brandon Aiyuk more than Brandon Aiyuk needs Kyle Shanahan? Does Brock Purdy need Brandon Aiyuk more than Brandon Aiyuk needs Brock Purdy? I think it's clear within the context of the 49ers system that the quarterback coach battery reigns supreme, that Purdy has elevated the level of play around him in such a way that he's a valuable asset for Brandon Aiyuk to play with. And I think that Kyle Shanahan has been a valuable asset for most quarterbacks that he's been with. So the 49ers have a good structure at the top. And most importantly, they have players outside of Brandon Aiyuk who can all contribute. We look at Deebo Samuel, obviously better against zone than man coverage. Jennings, a good receiver against man coverage. I don't think he's a 1, though. I don't think he's an X. I think Juwan Jennings will play that F receiver role for you. He'll beat the man coverage when you need him to out of the slot. He'll obviously block really, really well downfield to maintain that rushing threat. I think it's Ricky Pearsall who is the bona fide option for the 49ers to spell Brandon Aiyuk. And listen to this. The longer that training camp goes without Brandon Aiyuk, assuming he doesn't report, where we can't be sure yet, but assuming that this continues, the standoff continues through training camp, the longer this goes without him, the more time Ricky Pearsall is going to get at that X position. And we don't know yet how Ricky Pearsall is going to truly handle the physicality of the NFL game. That's not something you learn in spring. That's something that you might start to be able to learn over the course of training camp. So we don't know how that's going to go. We have inklings that it's going to go in a good direction for the 49ers based on how solid Ricky Pearsall was during OTAs, but this is going to require a whole new level of toughness since pads are going to come on during training camp, and then obviously the preseason is going to hit. But we do know that rookie receivers in the past have been very, very good under Kyle Shanahan. From Aiyuk himself in 2020 to Deebo Samuel in 2019 to even Dante Pettis in 2018, highly rated rookie receivers. So guys that were picked in the first couple of rounds, and that's Deebo Samuel, Dante Pettis, and Brandon Aiyuk. They all produced as rookies. It wasn't until the second season that the 49ers truly started seeing some trouble with really all three of those receivers. Aiyuk and Samuel bounced back from that after their second season. Samuel with a massive 2021. Aiyuk obviously turned it on down the stretch of 2021, and then 2022 and 2023 have been awesome 1,000-yard seasons. Dante Pettis never turned it back around. So rookie Pearsall is going to be hoping to blaze his own trail where he succeeds his rookie season, but also doesn't slow down into the sophomore year, and then obviously carries that forward into year 3 and beyond. Anyway, I think I've illustrated how this is very different just because of the weaponry that the 49ers have at the receiver position. I'm happy to answer some questions at this point. You think that Jauan Jennings would be good on the outside? I don't know if he quite has the straight line speed that you would want out of an outside receiver. And also they love him blocking inside because he's able to take on some more big bodies, and he's one of the toughest blockers there is. He's blocking safeties more often, maybe the occasional linebacker coming out of the slot instead of the outside cornerback. And he could really separate against those guys. He's a premier separator when it comes to his size, when you factor that in, working on the inside. So outside, Kyle Shanahan typically likes either big-time size, like we're talking 6'5" size, Megatron size, or big-time speed. And I'm not really sure if Jauan Jennings packs either of those two, so I think that they really like him in the slot. AJ Jenkins, well, that wasn't under Kyle Shanahan. AJ Jenkins was back in 2012, right? That was the disastrous 49ers 2012 draft class under Trent Baalke. Jim Harbaugh had to coach him. So rookie wide receivers didn't used to be as prosperous with the 49ers, but under Kyle Shanahan, rookies have been plenty prosperous for San Francisco. Is wide receiver the new running back, since you can get good wide receivers in the draft every year and wide receiver contracts are getting absurd? I mean, it could be heading in that direction. I think that there still is legitimate value out of giving Brandon Aiyuk a big contract, but I don't know if there's much value in giving him what you would say an absurd contract. So 49ers are willing to give a good one, a decently sized contract, probably in the range of $100 million total, right? If you're just going to look at the average per year and multiply it by 4 or 5, if it's 26 times 4 or 5, that's going to be over $100 million. But that is just a rudimentary number. We obviously have to look at the fully guaranteed total. We have to look at the structure of these deals. I don't know how far the 49ers are willing to go on that front. Obviously not as far as Minnesota went with Justin Jefferson, and obviously not as far as what would make Brandon Aiyuk happy right now, which is why the two sides remain further apart. But there is still value in having Brandon Aiyuk on this football team. Again, he's really damn good. You're not just going to bring a rookie in off the street fresh from college and produce at this kind of level up here in the upper right. It's not going to happen. So the 49ers are an objectively worse team without Brandon Aiyuk suiting up. He has that leverage over the 49ers. Now, can they make up most of that gap to still be ahead of the rest of the league with Ricky Pearsall and the other weapons on this offense? I think the 49ers think yes. Now, I think that they want to maximize their Super Bowl chances and they want Aiyuk around. And I think they think that his skill set and the way that he's worked, the way that he's blocked, the attitude that he's shown, I think that they believe that's a good investment for the long term. But again, even if you love a house, there's going to be a limit to how much you can pay for it. You're not going to just pay for anything. The price keeps on rising, or you know that you can't reach a deal with the seller of the house for a price that works for your budget. Ultimately, you're going to move on, right? Ultimately, you're not going to pay the house. Now, in this case, the 49ers still have access, right, for at least another year if they want more with the franchise tag. But Brandon Aiyuk remains under contract for 2024. He already has been under contract for 2024. So because of that, the 49ers don't necessarily have to make a purchase. They can just sit back and let him play at $14 million. And that should be a big deal for Brandon Aiyuk. I'd be shocked if $14 million this year wasn't a big deal. If it was a small enough deal for him to just sit out, that would be downright shocking to me. So that's why the 49ers believe they have the leverage. And I believe that is a correct belief. Loaded questions incoming. Why would Aiyuk post that video after he said he wants to stay? Well, he didn't say that he doesn't want to stay. He said the 49ers don't want him. That's what he said. And we know the 49ers want to keep him. How does this help Aiyuk? It just comes off as immature and unprofessional. Well, I mentioned earlier today that right here, Aiyuk is not helping himself if he's trying to negotiate through social media. I think it's as simple as that. I don't think this helped anybody. Now, he could just be having fun with the situation. Who knows? Maybe he texted the 49ers saying that he would put up a funny video and everything is still negotiating and it's going swell. But the Jeremy Fowler report from Sunday fits in with some frustration coming from Brandon Aiyuk when he said that, you know, these two sides, it's not at a close spot right now. So I tend to believe the most possible logical story, and that is that they're far apart, because that's what I predicted a few weeks ago when Jefferson signed this huge deal. I thought that Aiyuk and Lamb and Jamar Chase would want huge money, and I realized that teams probably wouldn't be willing to oblige those requests. So you have what we call polarization. You have one side, other side, big gap in between. Probably don't see the two sides come together until they actually have to. And again, that deadline pressure is not going to hit on June 17th. That's for sure. So in the waiting period, unless you've cleared some of this with the team and you're saying you're just going to joke around on social media, it's not anything that's going to help. Even then, it wouldn't help the negotiation, obviously. Even then, it would just be a joke on social media. But the 49ers keep this stuff really quiet on their end. They're not out talking about how much money they offered and this and that, playing this game through the media. Aiyuk seems to be doing that to at least a small extent, right? Every few days, we see him drop a little crumb for people. And it keeps people reasonably entertained. I think people are a little bit more annoyed and upset at this point. I think that it might have initially started a few days ago when he said he wanted to stay with the 49ers. It might have started with frustration over the fact that some of the fan base was getting tired of this. So he wanted to make it clear that he wants a deal to get done. But, you know, then you say something like this, and any knowledgeable observer, when they see this, realizes that it's not, no, they don't want you back. They just don't want you back at the price that you're demanding. So it doesn't make Aiyuk look good, even if he's trying to look better. I'll agree with that. And that's just where we stand right now. So I could see the motivation from Brandon Aiyuk, but I don't see the utility of him doing what he did. I think that this is a stressful situation for a player. You talked to all the guys that did sign their big deals recently, Nick Bosa, Deebo Samuel, all those guys talk about how stressful it is. I'm sure that part of the stress comes from the fact that people are turning on you online. It's never fun to read negative stuff about yourself. So you kind of want to get people back on your side. I can understand the urge to do that. So you put out a message. Yes, I want to sign with the 49ers. Today's message seemed a little bit more extreme, though, to say they don't want me back when they clearly do want you back. I mean, every line of messaging from the 49ers has been consistent about this, just not at your price. Anybody who understands the dynamics of this is not going to look at Brandon Aiyuk all too favorably for what happened today. Edgar says, regardless, it just looks bad no matter which way you look at it. I don't think it looks great. That's what I've been saying. It doesn't look great. It probably doesn't end up affecting negotiations because the 49ers have no room to budge. And you can hope it doesn't hurt him. You can hope that they don't start losing their patience and say, you know what? We'll remember once push comes to shove and the deadline pressure hits and you might need a little bit more money from us to sign the deal. Sometimes a team has the money at that point to add a little sweetener. Maybe the 49ers are a little less incentivized to do that. I don't know. That's why I'm saying anytime that you try to negotiate this through social media or at least drop breadcrumbs through social media, there is no upside for the player. There obviously would be no upside for the team, but there's no upside for Brandon Aiyuk to do what he did today. I do view it as a venting of frustration. Here we have an opinion that Aiyuk should have waited and let the 49ers come to him, but he went on offense. And I think that the 49ers did come to Brandon Aiyuk. I think they've had an offer. Mike Silver reported it was around $26 million a year. That was right around what I proposed in this piece right here, my contract that I put up on the screen a little bit earlier. And I think that Aiyuk, in all likelihood, didn't want to sign that because he was waiting for Justin Jefferson to get his money. And that's the one main thing we have to remember. That so many of the wrong takes about this are rooted in the thought that the 49ers should have signed Brandon Aiyuk earlier before Justin Jefferson, that was somehow their big mistake. The 49ers wanted to sign Brandon Aiyuk earlier. They wanted to do this all off season, but if Aiyuk wanted to wait for Justin Jefferson to up that offer, then the 49ers' hands are tied. They can't offer a lot of money early just for the hell of offering money early if Brandon Aiyuk is just going to say, no, I'm going to wait for Justin Jefferson. So, Aiyuk going on offense would make a little bit more sense and it would be more productive in this situation if it was on offense toward getting a deal done. But I think that Ayuk's version of offense has just been, okay, wait, I'm going to shoot for Justin Jefferson. I don't know if he's going to ask for, or if he's asking for money that's commensurate to Justin Jefferson's contract. That would be very extreme. But there's a gap of $36.2 million fully guaranteed between Jefferson's deal and Tyreek Hill's deal. So Aiyuk can be shooting for anywhere in that range. And if it's too high for the 49ers' tastes, if it's too rich for what they want to pay, what they can afford to pay in their long-term cost structure, they can just sit back and say no, because they've got the leverage of him already being under contract. And they've got the leverage of the potential franchise tag, so on and so forth. Thank you, Invader 49er. I've appreciated your comments. I think yours have been spot on over the time that you've been on the show or, on the show commenting. Appreciate that. The Vikings offering Jefferson so much when they lost Cousins is bizarre. It was bizarre behavior no matter who the quarterback is, because they leapfrogged the market so much that there was a little bit of bidding against themselves, a lot of bidding against themselves happening in that negotiation. Now, as far as Cousins goes, I get wanting to pay a receiver big time when you've drafted a quarterback in the first round, as they did with J.J. McCarthy. It looks like they're going to start Sam Darnold. They believe that there's some untapped potential there, just like Kyle Shanahan thought was the case with Darnold last year. And it looked like he was probably right. I was impressed with what Darnold did, earned him a $10 million contract with Minnesota. But anyway, if that quarterback position is a little less proven than it was with Kirk Cousins, a lot less proven, then you're going to want to make sure you stock it up with weapons surrounding that quarterback. So on that note, I really understand them paying Justin Jefferson a lot of money. But there's a difference between a lot of money and an exorbitant amount of money. And I think we're seeing more the latter with this Justin Jefferson contract. And that's what's really blown up the receiver market and created this polarization and frustration from both sides. 49ers aren't stupid. Brandon Aiyuk isn't going anywhere. Yeah, I mean, I'm not even entertaining trade talk right now. It's a waste of time. It's a hypothetical. The 49ers don't want to get worse as a football team in a win now season. You know, it's if the talks devolve even more to the point where it's so ugly that there's some personal issues and you can legitimately sit back and say, wow, Brandon Aiyuk is not going to play for the football team this year, and the relationship is damaged for years to come, even though that wouldn't make any sense from his perspective if you're looking at this in a game theoretical angle. If that happens, then yeah, maybe the 49ers look to get rid of a toxic asset in this case, but I don't think it's anywhere near that point. Again, all of these deals, whether it be Kittle in 20, Warner in 21, Samuel in 22, and Bosa in 23, they weren't done at this point. They weren't done on June 17th. They didn't get finished until much, much later in the summer. In Bosa's case, it was almost fall by the time that deal got done in early September. So we're not at any sort of point of toxicity yet. I think we're at a point of posturing, and the 49ers will just go ahead and stand in the pocket. They have the ability to stand in the pocket even longer than they did last year. Last year with Nick Bosa, there was real deadline pressure in week one. This year with Aiyuk, yes, there's deadline pressure, but I don't think that it's this, oh my God, we have to cave to these contract demands or we're totally screwed. Last year, there was a little bit of that because Bosa was such a unique player. Aiyuk within the context of the 49ers isn't. I mean, he's a plus receiver who, I mean, put up awesome efficiency last year. I'll continue to show this. But despite that, they've got other weapons who can give them really good efficiency as well. They've got Shanahan, they've got Purdy, they've got the ability to run past luxury, and they can say that this is not the Nick Bosa situation. All right, so wanted to make a little shorter one on this. Wanted to join you guys one more time. I know everybody's watching the NBA Finals. This could be it. This could be Boston winning, closing the basketball season on us. So go ahead and check that out. Watch the rest of the videos I put out. I've talked a lot about this today. Tight end U is tomorrow, the on-field portion. It started today. Check some of that out. I covered that a little bit in the previous video, and we will move forward from here. All right, everybody, take care.